Okay, good evening, Hayden. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Amateur Radio Experimenters Group general meeting for tonight. Tonight's presentation, we're going to do the presentation first, and then we'll drop the YouTube stream for the internal meeting. This has all, of course, come about because of all the social isolation require stuff that we've had to do, and a few people asking some questions around. This has all come about because of. That's better. This will come about because people have been sort of asking us a bit about some of the FT8 tricks and tips and so on that I use, and that a few of the others who are prolific FT8 DXs use. There's a lot of people that want to get started in FT8, especially since we're all stuck at home and can't do anything. And it's a nice way to play a little bit of DX, I suppose, if you've got compromised antennas or compromised sites or noise floor or whatever. So this is not a bad way to perhaps show you how to get it all up and running, and also show you some of the tips and tricks for working some of the rarer stations. I will go through putting the software in, all the different components, how you integrate it with your logger, what hardware you use, and we'll also take a look at some on-air activity, how it works, what you're seeing. I'll try to describe through the screens. Hayden, if he has any questions coming through the YouTube chat, he'll speak up and relay them through to us here on Zoom. The club members are welcome to pipe up at any time, with the reminder that it is being broadcast out on YouTube as well. So this is a public one tonight, like it is down the hall when we have our visitors present. Okay, going to certainly start with what is FT8. Everyone's heard of it. Most people probably think they now know what it is. Well, let's take a bit closer look. It was first released in July. It was designed to be, it was specifically designed for HF. It was faster alternative to JT65. Those who remember JT65, well, it was really designed for moon bounce work originally, but got adapted to HF. And then the guys that developed JT65, so Joe, Steve K9AN, I think this is called, and Bill Somerville in the UK. They came up with FT8, mostly Steve's creation, I believe, which was much more suited to HF use. What does it let you do? Basically exchange signal reports, not a lot else. But it's a really cool way to see, did your signal make it to that rare and remote DX? And so that's really what it's forte. It's there for DXing, for trying to poke a signal into the furthest corners of the world. I actually find it's really helpful when you want to do other forms of DX, to actually use it as a propagation sounder. Watching FT8 with so many stations on there today, it's a fantastic way to get a feel for, is the band open? And you can learn an awful lot by watching what's going on the FT8 channels to have some idea, can I get through on CW or SSB or something like that in another channel? What do you need? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but that's just a bit of a history of FT8. What do you need to use it? Hardware-wise, basically, you need an amateur transceiver. In my case, I'm using Ellercraft gear, but I've also put it on my ICOM 706. I've had it on my Kenwood, old TS690. I've used a variety of interfaces to hook to it. The new modern rigs, don't ask me how to configure them, because I am not a user of them, but I know we have hooked ICOM IC7300 and equivalents direct to the software using USB. Plug the USB from the radio into your computer, and basically away you go. So you don't need these boxes if you've got one of those types of rigs. The purpose of something like a signal link or a microham is that they'll actually take care of your push-to-talk lines, your CAT serial communications lines to your radio, as well as the audio interface. So that's why you have one of these boxes if you don't have a digital radio. It also deals with all the isolation and so on to help you get your ground loops out, get your earthing sorted, and so on. Varieties of ways of doing this. These are two that I just happen to have used. Is there really much to say more about hardware? Does anybody have any hardware questions? I suppose, first of all.
Because that's an amazingly cool thing. To be told that you sound like a Lex singer is incredible. The other way around, not so cool. No. I'm sure there are Lex singers going, you know,
No, but lots of background noise. So we'll go with that. Okay. Let's get to the interesting bit. Let's go to the live demo, because that's really what this is tonight was about, is to talk to you about what happens live on the air with it. Drop that one for the moment. Where do I get it from, I guess, is the first question. So if you want to download FT8, you're looking for the WSJT-X page. And here's the URL up here. So Physics Princeton EDU, Pulsar K1JT, and that's Joe Taylor's call sign, K1JT. He's made all the software available here, and the package you're interested in is WSJT-X. So if we go there, tells you all about the software, the latest releases. It's interesting, at the moment, we've actually got 2 active releases. So the first one that is live and most people should be using today is WSJT-X 2.1.2. You've got base code that you can download. Where has he got the download here? It's documentation, description. Yeah, here's the installation packages. So this will run on Windows, Linux, Macintosh, and you can also get the source code for it. There's also manuals in a whole variety of languages, and there's documentation for all elements of the system. The software is dead easy. You just get basically whichever version of Windows you're running, either 32 or 64, pick the relevant download package. Linux, you've got all these different distributions that pre-built packages are available for. Macintosh, again, you've got a version of Macintosh that you can run for it as well. It'll do all of these native. So the guys have really worked to make it a multi-platform system. Download it, piece of cake. Like anything, just download the software. There you go. The trick at the moment is Joe's also worked on a new candidate release called 2.2.0, and he's called it RC1. Now, these packages are always cool to play with one provision. Remember, first of all, they have expiry dates on them. So if you do load this version, and I am running it tonight, be aware that it will stop working in the middle of June. It is a beta package. It is a test package. It is not intended to be completely bug-free. In fact, the reason they let it out in the wild for all of us to play with it is to actually test it and see if we can break it. So they have released a new version of WSJT. Now, what's in the new version? Well, in short, they've improved the FT4 decoders immensely. They've improved the FT8 decoder quite a bit. They've improved the JT65 decoders. In fact, now people are saying WSJT-X is better than WSJT-10 for moon bounce, which is an interesting comment. This is a lot of purists have not moved away from the old WSJT up until now, and there's a few of them interested in this. It also supports a whole bunch of other modes too. So this thing isn't just about FT8. This package actually will let you do MSK144 for Meteor scatter and a few other modes, and it'll also do Whisper. So it's really interesting what this package can actually do. Simple to download it. Once you've downloaded it, you can install it. I won't reinstall it here because it'll install over the top of what I've already got. But the installation is no different to what you would normally see. It's just standard Windows package install, and away you go. So once you've installed it, then what do? Well, we run it up. So if I launch it, I will see, in fact, I'll launch it from scratch. So when I run it, this is the beta version, to keep that in mind. It launches, and this is the first thing it's going to remind you is this is a pre-release version. So I am running 2.2. It'll stop working on June the 10th. So if you do install it, don't be surprised on June the 10th when it stops working. It's by design. You'll be expected to have downloaded the full version of WSJT 2.2 before that date, and they'll release it before that date. So click on OK. Now, if this was a clean install, the next thing you've really got to do is you've got to go in and actually set it up. There's a bunch of tabs across the top here that are you need to be aware of. The first one that's really interesting is you can go to the File Settings tab, and it will open up all of the settings to configure WSJT. There's a few basic things you have to put in. First of all, on this General tab here, you put your call sign in, you put your grid square in. You can leave region all. You can actually set your region if you want to. I just leave most of these as the default. There's a couple of things I usually do set though. I quite like setting blank line between decoding periods. Now what that's doing is here you can see it's got the dash line and 40. So 40 meters tells me I'm listening to the 40 meter band, but the dash line tells me the breakpoints between each 15 seconds. Very funny, folks. Very funny. Ha ha. I agree with you though. Yes, somebody did say we were going to be HF bombed tonight. Blank line between decoding periods, worth setting. Just distance in miles, we're a metric country, so don't bother. TX messages to frequency window, I normally set to yes. And I also set show DX grid, a DXEC grid and work before status. So you'll see some of these things are colored in. So the greens is a CQ, but it's for a country I've worked before. If it was a brand new country, it would come up as a yellow or a purple or whatever the irrelevant color is for the status. The colors you can actually see, this is the different options available. So it's a new call, a new continent on a band, new CQ zones, new CQ zone on a band, new ITU zones, new DXCCs, and they come up in these colors and they get highlighted over here. So that's really quite helpful. That should all be set by default. The behavior also here, disable TX after sending 73. It'll do that anyway, by the way. Don't think you can defeat it and make it a CQ machine without doing that. I don't bother with really setting anything else here. I do set allow TX frequency changes while transmitting. I'm not sure that's necessarily a good idea. I've seen it recently actually lock up and crash a couple of times on me when I've done that. So that one, be a little wary of it. It does some strange things. But that's the first page. Really, the key things to set here is I usually set blank line, TX messages to the receive window, show the grids, and double click will set TX enable. So if I want to work somebody here, what that means is if I pick a call sign out, pick a spot on the band where I'm going to transmit, I'll just close this for a minute. So double click on transmit simply means if that's where I want to transmit, and let's say I want to call JS6TKY, I double click on him, puts him over here. I'm now on the air. Enable transmit's going. You'll see the scrolling has stopped, and I've just called JS6TKY. It's probably going to get really strange in a minute when I stop the sequence halfway through. Let's see if, in fact, he answers me. He might, but he wasn't very strong. I'll just give it 15 seconds to see if he does answer, otherwise I'll drop the transmitter. No, that's fine. We'll go into more detail of actually making a QSO in a minute. Okay, so we'll go back to the settings for a minute. So that's just trying to explain to you what double click on call sets to TX enable. I just clicked on a call over here in the band activity window and it put me into transmit. That's why I did it. The next most important thing you want to set up is your radio controls. Now, there's a couple of things here that you probably need to dispel a few myths. Some people understand what's going on here, some don't. The first thing to make sure you can do is to actually get your rig and cat control up and running. You can run it without this, but there's a reason to run it with, and it all depends on the purity of your signal that you're transmitting. If I don't want to run it with a radio, I can just set this to none, and none of the cat stuff will work. But now I'm going to have problems potentially with PTT and actually getting it to transmit. So you do need to set at least a rig from memory. So I'll put that back in. Pick your serial port, make your baud rates right. Your PTT method, in my case, I'm using cat PTT, so I'm actually sending the PTT signals over my serial port. With the sound cards I've got, I could actually use DTR or RTS to transmit, to key the PTT line through my sound cards, through my signal link or my microham if I wanted to. I use cat because it just has one less relay to click around inside the shack when FT8's running.
GRFR?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just with that cat control as well, it does. It can utilize a number of the bigger Ham Radio Deluxe and other platforms to connect as well.
That's right. I think that is the case. I haven't played with HRD, so I can't comment much on that myself, but I certainly know people that have done it. And I think they're using HRD to do the transmitting, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm running through HRD.
Yeah. So how do you configure that? Is that picking a separate rig, or you pick your rig, but then you're steering the cat through the...
No, it's a drop down in the rig area there. It should be HRD.
Let's have a look for it. Ham Radio Deluxe.
Yeah, and Hamlib. That was the other one I was looking at because I know a lot of people use that.
So both of those are obviously, just pick that. If you've got a Flex, you've got the Flex rig in here. Most rigs are covered. I know that Kenwoods are in here. All the ICOMs are in here. There's one for the 7300, which has become very popular. So, you know, there's the rig library is very extensive. So, you know, you shouldn't have too many problems finding your radio in that list. The key thing with getting all of this cat stuff running is when it comes to selecting what do you do with split operation in particular. I probably should also just mention the mode one as well. So I always use data packet. That's what the other craft needs. Some radios you might have to pick USB. You don't use lower sideband for FT8 no matter what band you're on. It is always upper sideband. So it's a little tip to remember. So even if you're on 40 or 80 or 160, it's always upper sideband for digital. Unless you're running RISI. There's always an exception. So split operation. What do we pick? I always pick rig. And I pick rig because what that actually will do is, depending on where I put the red bar here in the waterfall, and the red bar is where I'm going to transmit inside this frequency range of 300 hertz to 3 kilohertz. So you might say, hang on, why is he talking transmit 300 to 3 kilohertz? I'll explain that in a sec. I've had to explain it now, it'll be easier. So 300 to 3 kilohertz, what am I saying here? So you might say, but hang on, my transmit frequency is 7074. Yeah, it is for your carrier. But of course, we're not transmitting carrier, we're transmitting some audio tones. And those audio tones are at a frequency inside this audio spectrum. So this is the audio spectrum. So this is 300 hertz of audio all the way up to 3 kilohertz of audio. So if I have my audio spectrum like that, I'm looking across this audio passband and trying to find a hole to transmit in. And say at the moment, for the last 2 cycles, I've just seen the dark blue, so there's very little signals there. In fact, there's probably less signals up here. I reckon in there is probably the best spot. So there's nobody on a couple of cycles there. What I've done though is, if you have a look here, it says 7074. If I go and transmit there, you'll see that's now saying 7075. And you might think, well, hang on, what's it done there and why? When you're getting the rig control to do it, what the software is trying to do is it's trying to keep the audio tones between 1000 and 1500 hertz. And it's doing that so that you don't have any harmonics or aliasing happening that's corrupting your audio on the outbound. By putting this audio in that passband, it also puts it right in the middle of the flat part of your transmitter passband, so you're introducing as little distortion as possible into your audio. Yeah, suppress carrier, Matt, you're right. So when I transmit, I'm effectively going to shift my radio up the band, in this case 1 kilohertz, to hit a frequency of 1 kilohertz above, or 1.5 or 1.5 or 1.4 less kilohertz above my actual tone. So my tones here, I'm trying to transmit on 2800 hertz. So it's letting me do that. Actually, it's between 1500 and 2 kilohertz. So it's not 1015, it's between 1500 and 2 kilohertz. So it put my suppressed carrier is on, now sitting on 1000 hertz. My audio is 1.5 kilohertz above that. Thank you, Mark. My audio is 1.5 kilohertz above that, so it's shifted my transmitter to 7075 when I transmit. As soon as I drop the transmitter, it drops the receiver back to 7074. And that way I always keep my tones between 1500 and 2 kilohertz. Means that I've got the least chance of getting dirty audio. An example of bad audio has just come up on the band. We can see it here. You can see all these funny feathers here. And if you look kilohertz below that, there they are again. And if you look at kilohertz below that, you might find the offending signal. So whoever that is down there is probably responsible for those other two sets of harmonics. And when you set your audio wrong, in other words, you overdrive your audio into your input, you can end up producing these sorts of grotty products. So it's one of the things where with all digital modes, everyone keeps saying you've not got to overdrive your ALC. So your automatic level controls on your radio, the whole point is not to introduce distortion at the audio stage of your radio. Again, this is something that varies radio by radio, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details of exactly how to set the ALC here, because if I say something for my rig, it'll be different for everyone else's. But needless to say, there's plenty of literature on the internet about it. The general theory is you don't want any ALC on your rig when this is running, but that's not universal. So for instance, the Elecrafts do their ALC a different way. And there's a particular setting you go for with the Elecrafts for your ALC. In this case, I need my ALC at about 3 to 4 increments on the meter. And in fact, with the Elecraft rigs, what that's actually done is it's edged me right up to just the start of the ALC actually doing something for real. Something to keep in mind. So why have I gone to rig mode, and why have I tried to explain all that? Well, by putting rig mode is I'm putting the cleanest transmit audio out that I can. By going into settings and picking rig mode instead of fake it or none, it's making sure that I actually have the rig follow it and keep that offset. I can run with none. It'll generate tones at 300 hertz and inject them in the radio, and it will generate tones at 2500 hertz and inject them in the radio. But the chances are your audio passband of your rig's not very good at that point. And you're probably going to distort your own signal before you even get it out the door. You know, an example, if I showed you the high frequency, if I come down the low end of the band and hit transmit, which it will do in a sec, you'll see there it's jumped to 707.2.5. Again, it's tried to keep me between 1500 and 2 kilohertz, but because I've gone right down below 500 hertz here, it's shifting the rig down to 707.2.5 to allow it to work. So that's why you have the rig mode running. Because it actually keeps your tones always sounding like they're 1500 hertz to 2 kilohertz. And so there's a much higher quality signal going out the door. So that's that little tip with the settings. On the next thing you really got to do is set your audio up. So you need your input and output sound card selected. So in my case here, you can see I've got my microham picked. This is usually in amongst all the rest of your devices. Another really important top tip is to go into your audio settings and make sure the Windows sounds are not directed to these devices. Make sure that if you're playing YouTube, you don't end up with your Dirty Harry movie going out over 20 meters or worse, as I heard the other day. Let's see if I can actually explain this a little. So if I go into my volume control settings, where is it again? No, that's not it. Volume mixer is, I think, it. Nope. Somewhere in here. Sounds, is that it? Nope. Recording devices is probably the one I want. That's it. So one of the things you want to see here is you can see my audio's going from either my webcam or my microphone can hear me speaking. What I don't want to have is my sources here or my playback sources here being linked into my microphone inputs that are driving the headset microphone on the microham. If they were feeding that or the line input as I'm talking or I'm playing something on YouTube, and if I see this going up and down, I know that I've got something crossed where basically something's going out over 20 meters that shouldn't be. So one of the things to actually do first of all, set the communications to do nothing. The sounds, somewhere in here, playback, I think it's under properties. You can actually tell it to send the window sounds not to your sound card. And then it's covered in the documentation, but it's another really important point, because if you don't do that, anything that your computer bings, bongs, tweets, or movies that you play, or whatever's going on, or Skype phone calls that you have, you may inadvertently find that it's going out over the air. So, and that can be a bit embarrassing. So just keep that one in mind with the setups. What else is really interesting in setting stuff up? You don't usually have to play with those. They're pretty fine. I don't bother with the TX macros. Reporting is another really useful page just to be aware of. I do fill in my op call here. I do sell it. Here's where I set my logging up. So at the end of a QSO, I've ticked prompt me to log QSO. Really helpful one to tick. If you don't do that, it won't actually remind you to log the QSO, and you'll never actually get a record of the fact you did it if you don't set that. The other really helpful one, though, is this one here, enable PSK reporter spotting. And you might think, well, what's that all about? Well, on the internet, there's this lovely little service called PSK Reporter. And what it can do, and you can see I've just made a mess of the world. Everybody else in the world is sending out spots because they've got that checked. And I can see how strong I've been received right across the region. And in fact, you can see there that I've been seen over basically most of the Pacific Rim and all of the United States, not to mention a sizable portion of the Caribbean, which is interesting. So this is how I use FT8 as a bit of a propagation monitor, because I'll put out some CQs and then I'll come over here and say, how well was I heard? And I can start to see here all the signal strength reports and how long ago that was achieved. Now, there's a couple of tips to get all of that up. The main one is display options. So I turn off the faint monitors. I turn the monitors if there's no report. I turn off the pink blob because it just annoys me. I do turn on the show signal noise ratio. And what it will do is it hides sparkly monitor markers after 10 minutes. So if it's been within 10 minutes, it comes up with white lettering. After 10 minutes, it comes up with black lettering. Simple as that. Distance units automatic, so it knows I'm in Australia, so it's giving me it in kilometers. As you can see, I can sit on one of these markers and I can see how well he heard me and how far away he was. I can come all the way over here. Let's see. So yeah, he's 10,500 miles away and he heard me at -14. A more southerly path, he's hearing me at -20, although I was just heard in Jamaica, which isn't bad. You come up here to Canada, I'm being here at -7. And that was from those few short transmissions on 40 meters. So setting that PSK reporter flag to on is what lets your station report into that network as well, and lets other people see if they've been heard by you. Really, really nifty little feature of this thing. To me, it's the power of FT8 is being able to use it as that propagation sounder. Control panel sounds, that's where I should have looked. Control panel sounds. I'll just have one more try to see if I can get it up. Sound scheme. I think because I've actually turned all mine off and I'm really reluctant to touch it. Yeah, so you set it in here and basically try to turn everything off. Okay, the next thing you're interested in the setup is the frequencies. Now, this should come by default with the frequencies you want in it. You can see there's lots and lots of them here in mine because I've been at this for a while. There's different frequencies for different modes, so FT4, FT8, JD65. The thing you need to be aware of is in Fox and Hound mode, you might want to add other frequencies to this. That's actually really easy to do. Just open settings, come to the frequency tab, right-click and you'll see the insert button. And then you can pick a mode for the frequency, or you can just say all, and then put it in. But remember, this is in megahertz. So let's say I wanted to add to this 7.041. Just happens to be the Japanese FT8 domestic frequency. I can insert that in there. There it is in the list, and now it becomes available to me here as one of the options on 40 meters. So I can go and have a look at 7041 and see if there's anybody there. And it looks like there is. So if I leave that listing there for a few minutes, we should see some of the JAs. Their band plans is a little different. They actually are supposed to, if they're having domestic JA to JA communications, they're supposed to do it down the lower end of the band. They're allowed up on 7074 for DX, but they're not supposed to talk amongst themselves up there. So sometimes it's cute to come down to 7041 and call one because they fall out of their chair. They can quite happily work you down here, but they're not supposed to work each other up there. So it's one of the curious little channels to come and try sometimes. So that's almost all of the settings. The last one I'm going to bring up is the advanced settings. And this is where you really need to start experimenting and playing a little bit. Now, I'm being a bit bloody-minded and having a high-powered computer behind it, I've basically gone for broke. I've turned my random erasure patterns up to 10, my aggressive decoding up to 10. I've turned on my 2-pass decoding. I've widened out my bandwidth at 3 kilohertz. I've done everything here that probably a lot of people shouldn't do. If your computer's not very powerful, turning up some of this stuff doesn't do any good. In fact, I just realized that's all for JT65 anyway, which is old days from when I used to play with that. The useful thing for this tab, though, that everybody needs to be aware of with advanced is it has this special operating activity tab. Now, if you've never turned Fox mode on before, and I'll mention Fox mode in more detail a little later, we're actually going to try and do a demo. But if you need to work somebody in Fox and Hound mode because they're DX that you want, the advanced tab, click that and select Fox is what you need. Actually, select Hound. Sorry, please don't select Fox. Select Hound, and it will put your program into the correct mode to respond to the Fox and Hound signals that the big DX expeditions will run. And this is a special protocol designed to deal with really big pileups. Basically, I mean, we ran this on Tonga as Fox when I was out in A35JT last year, and we were working 5 stations at once. And we had a pile up of about 100 stations around. So every 15 seconds, we had 100 stations plus calling us. And the mode is designed to work volume as fast as you can. Great for de-expeditioning. Normally, nobody would turn this on as a Fox. It's absolutely frowned upon to be a Fox and not really be a station with lots of traffic expected. However, it's very common for everybody to have to pick Hound mode. Now, there's this long-handed way of turning it on. So, you know, say I go off to a frequency and I'm finding a Hound station or a Fox station there. The hard way to turn it on is to come down, quick settings, advanced, turn it on here, put in Hound mode. Yep, okay, I'm all set. Hit OK, and it will switch over to Hound mode. In Hound mode, by the way, it will not let me actually, I think, transmit on 7074. I will need to go to a frequency where there is actually a Hound. On 40 meters, typically that's 7056, but you will find them all over the place. And this is one of the tricks that people have to realize with Fox and Hound mode is sometimes it just pays to look at the band and just watch. So this is my SDR band scope. So I'm sitting here. I can see the main FT8 channel sitting here. I can see the JA channels down here on 7041, and I can see some FT8 down there because I can see every 15 seconds you just get this characteristic. There's a burst of signals, and there's a gap. Burst of signals, there's a gap. So I can sit here and I can look for that pattern. And then I can figure out what frequency is that Fox and Hound traffic actually active on. So a top tip, use your SDR. Don't be afraid to turn your VFO. You're not locked into just 7074 or one of the other main channels. So if I've gone to 7056, now I am wondering, is David listening here? If he is, I might get him to pop his transmitter up and see if we can decode him. But I'll just quickly show you a Fox appear for a minute. Or I'll just see if I can get his attention. Hang on, I've got to get that back up. Here he comes. So you're about to see a Fox call going out. So BDX is now calling me in Fox mode. Now that might just look like a standard call. When it gets interesting is when you have lots of people replying to it. And we'll try to get a few people up in a little while to show you what that looks like. But more importantly, I'll talk a bit about how do you have the greatest success of trying to get a Fox contact to actually work. This is the whole point of this. So if you want to just stop it for a minute, Dave, we'll come back to this, but I just want to quickly talk about this is the result of setting up Fox mode. So I'll just turn that back off for the moment. Now there's a little trick here for turning this on and off. That's a shortcut. One of the things you can do in WSJT is you can set things called configurations here. And what I can do is I can actually clone my main configuration and I end up with a copy of it. Now what these let me do is I can actually have a different way of configuring the program here and I can switch to it versus my main one. So if I've got my main one here running away, if I wanted to say switch to become a Hound station, I can pick my Fox and Hound configuration. It will shut the program down and it will restart it in Hound mode, which is what it's doing here, hopefully. There we go. And you'll see in this particular case, I've actually got it set up in Fox mode, but that was for a test I did the other day. I'll just put it back into Hound mode. So normally I would have switched to that and it would have come straight up in Hound mode. So this using the configurations and setting up a default and then setting up alternates makes it very swift to switch backwards and forwards between the two different modes. And that's how I suggest people, if you're chasing DX, having that second configuration prepped and ready is really handy because you usually want to be jumping in and trying to be one of the first to call them. So keep that one in mind. The other little things I do for settings, mode, FT8, obviously, view, you can see all sorts of different things. So the waterfall, I can turn the waterfall on. I can turn the waterfall off. I can turn the waterfall back on again. He's got a few other pieces of information here as well. If you're doing moon bounce, you might want to put the astronomical data up because it'll tell you where the moon is. Turn that off again. Most of these you don't need. The other one I do though is I do come into decode and I set it to deep and I turn on the a priori decoding. So what is a priori decoding? Everybody used to think that, hang on, FT8's sort of talking in the internet in the background and really figures out the contact before I've even started. No, it's not what it's doing. What a priori decoding is doing is if I say, I think I'm searching for FG0GJ, and I put him into my DX call here, it's telling the program a hint to look for characters that look like that. So what it's basically doing is it's giving the decoder a bit of a helping hand to say, look, before you search for all the others, search for that pattern that I've put in here and spend more time looking for that pattern. And so hence it just improves the chance of getting a decode of the call sign you want to work. And you further that out by actually setting your red decode box up here on top of the station involved. So I'll say if I believe it's him, set it here, put his call sign in, it'll maximize the chance of me actually decoding it, which is helpful. It looks like we have a mad DX frenzy. Everybody's trying to work PZ5RA in Suriname. Go, Chris. So the decode, make sure you set it to deep, make sure you set it to enable AP to maximize your decoding. That's kind of the basics of setting it up. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point, because the next two things I'm going to do is just show you some helper programs and talk about probably the most critical aspect of what this program needs, and that is your clock to be in sync. So before we go on, are there any questions? Nope. Cool. All right. First of all, let's talk clocks. One of the most important things you need to have come on. That'll be right.
Sorry, Grant, I didn't unmute.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Gary Hurden and I both use Fake It. What's your view about that compared with USB?
I honestly can't remember how Fake It works.
Okay. I'll
I'd have
study it.
I'd have to go back and play with it again because I stopped using it a long time ago.
Okay, I might go to USB. Thanks.
The point of the USB was it tries to keep your tones at 1500. I believe what Fake It's doing is still changing your tone frequencies.
Yep.
So you can run Fake It, but I'm pretty sure it's going to wobble your tone frequencies around outside that 1500 to 2 kilohertz range. The whole point, of course, is I want to run in my 1500 to 2 kilohertz range because that's the sweet spot of my transmitter audio.
Yep.
And it's the most linear passband of my transmitter audio, and that's why it does it.
There's a question from YouTube, Grant. From VK5GR logging. If you log a QSO before you've got the other guy's 7.3, does it consider it a completed contact even if it isn't?
Logging is an interesting topic. You log whenever you think you've completed your contact, is my view. 73 isn't needed to actually confirm a contact. The official line in Moon Bounce world used to be, I've seen your call, I've seen your report, I've sent my report, you've acknowledged my report. Now, back then, the acknowledging my report used to be with an RRR. 73 was merely a courtesy. Once you've sent your R report, and we'll talk about this when I go through and demonstrate a sequence. In fact, I'm thinking probably a static look at a sequence might be easier to start with. No, let's just put this up. Sequence. Oh, what do you know? I didn't keep it. Let me come back to sequence because I've got a slide I can show that'll better explain it. First thing I'm trying to do is to get this up so I can actually drag it across. Just having screen wars here over the other screen. There it is. Right. I wanted to show you this. So I was talking about time first of all. So I'll take the logging question on notice. I'll just talk about time first. The first thing you will absolutely see on the screen that's going on is time ticks every 15 seconds. One of the key things to look at on this screen, some of the numbers that are really interesting to look at. First of all, you got the time that you saw the transmission, you got the signal strength, and then you got this thing called DT. So that's your time differential. DT needs to be ideally as close to 0 as you can get. You'll see most people are DT0 or 0.1. There's a few here that are getting a bit out. So one's 0.8, one's minus 0.6. So that's saying he's 0.8 seconds late or he's 0.6 seconds early. About the farthest you can get that to survive is about 2 seconds. But at 2 seconds, you're going to miss a lot of decodes.
There's a 1.1 there. Right?
There's a 1.1, yeah. Where is he?
Up a bit.
Hang on.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, 1.2. So W0YK, his clock is a little out. At 1.2 seconds, that's started to reach the point where it won't always decode properly. The key thing you want to be able to have is a program that keeps your computer clock in sync. Now, don't rely on Windows Time to do it. Yes, there's supposed to be an NTP server in Windows, but the reality is it just doesn't keep it reliable enough. There's a variety of different packages that'll do it. One is this BKT time sync, which is the one I'm using. BKT time sync is written by an amateur. He's in Italy. Very useful little program. It'll actually synchronize to an NTP server. And in my case, I've set it to a local one here in Adelaide. And it's port and so on to set that up. The beauty is I can plug a GPS in and use BKT time sync to sync to a GPS as well. Now, when you don't have internet access, that's critical. And again, when I've done my DXpeditions, we've used the GPS and not relied on NTP. So that's really cool. So if I actually use my GPS config here, I can sync the clock to the GPS, and it will keep me within 0.1, 0.2 of a second. And so I will still be able to decode stuff. Not having a program like this, and there's several, there's Dimension 4, there's this, there's Enemy A Time, there's a few others. This happens to be the flavor of the moment for me. Not having one of these running, you will find your main clock drifts. And I've found occasion when I've forgotten to launch it, that my main machine can drift a couple of seconds, especially over a day or two. So that's a problem. This has one little feature that I find really handy, and that is the manual set function. And this is going to give away one of my tricks, but well, it'll help you work somebody rare. If I've got, so this guy here, he's 1.4 seconds out. So if I actually put in here, let's say I'm going to delay my time 1 second. The next time we see him come up, first of all, you should see everybody else's clock delay. Let's put the monitor back on. So the next round of frames that I decode here, I'm expecting all the DTs to be out. But the beauty is that the guy who was out already, so you can see everybody there's 1 second out, 1.2 seconds out, 1 second out. So I've delayed my time 1 second, but there's some guys who are now getting a lot closer. Let's see if the guy who was out is still there. No, so it looks like he's gone away. There's a, yeah, so he's not there at the moment. You need to set your DT as close as you can to an average of 0 for everybody. So there's somebody at 2.2. If I actually wanted to hear VK5GR a bit better, I could go manual set and say I want to go another second. I think that'll shift it to 2 seconds here. I think it's cumulative. I'm trying to remember now. You start to see, by the way, on the waterfall, how the start times start to drift and those lines start to show that I'm going off time with everybody else. Yeah, so it's now gone 2 seconds. So I'm probably way out now. But it's a way of chasing somebody's clock around. If you really want to work somebody and you find that their clock is off, and some of the DXpeditions have had problems that haven't had GPS, this is a way of actually overcoming that. You can set your clock back by just going sync now. It'll take the clock offset back out. I'm now back to standard. And the next pass after this, it should actually come clean. So missed everybody that pass. Next pass, I'll be back to DT0. So the DT is something important to watch. So I'll just put that back in my system tray and let that go. So that's clock that I wanted to do. The other little piece of software I do want to tweak the talk before we get into logging is this little program here. And this is called JT Alert. JT Alert was written by VK3AMA, Laurie. It's a helper application for WSJT. And what it's actually doing is this is linking WSJT to my main system log. Now, people use all sorts of things, Home Radio Deluxe and others. I happen to use DXkeeper. What this lets me do is link my WSJT. When I log a contact here, it logs it straight into DXkeeper via JT Alert. And you can see here, there's the contact I had with VK5GR earlier, and YG3ELE. They've gone straight into my log here. I haven't opened that log. I haven't touched it. I haven't typed anything into it. JT Alert's doing all that for me. JT Alert also helps with identifying countries. It also flags here, if I found somebody who I haven't worked before, it's looking in my log database and it's keeping track of who I've worked. So this is when it starts to get really powerful for DX chasing. If I want to find a call I've never worked before, he'll come up here in yellow and stand out. So it's like, oh, there's somebody there I really want to talk to. Quick, get on him. Loading and installing this program is a piece of cake. There's a website called hamapps.com. It's got all of your software on here. You just go down to the download page. You'll see the latest version. So 2.6.15 is the current version here, and absolutely worth installing. Now, there's another really, really, really powerful function of this that I love, and that is this ability to send a text message. So if I want to say, look for somebody here on WSJT, oh, look, Steve's online. So let's just say that I'm trying to complete a contact, or somebody's desperately calling me, but I'm answering somebody else, and he's hoping for a contact. At times I've had people look me up on this, and they'll type in something like, Steve, can you hear me? I really need you for my DXCC. And I'll hit send. And then hopefully Steve's watching this, and he'll actually go and type me something back, and it'll pop up as a message. That messaging capability is also useful at times. So if I see, I wonder who else might have it. I wonder. So QI, are you online? No, you're not. Who else might be? No. See, a lot of people don't run it. The thing is, if you are running it, and particularly if there's a group of you up close.
I'm online.
Sorry, you are? Okay.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, there's a message I've got back from Steve. So as an example, I can now have a contact with Steve on the internet to set something up, and then we can try it on the radio. The beauty of this is, and this is one of the problems that we find here in Adelaide, and I'm sure the other cities see it too, and we do see it domestically across states in Australia as well. If we're all trying to chase some DX, one of the biggest problems you can have, and I'm actually going to ask Steve, if you could just start calling CQ on 40, Steve, you will start to see what happens. So this comes to the next point about channel placement and how do you use the band. One of the biggest problems we actually have, particularly when there's half a dozen of us here in Adelaide, so there's myself, Chris SA, Steve SFA, are probably the three of us are probably the ones that most clobber each other. There's Steve. Look at that nice big loud signal. By the way, that's not distorted. That's my receiver having a hard time because Steve here is about 50 over 9. If I wanted to try to have a contact with somebody, but that somebody was a weak station on the same half slot as Steve's transmitting, I might actually get him up and say, Steve, would you be able to drop your transmitter for a sec? I really want to work DX, blah, blah, blah. And because we're all friends around here, he might pause his transmitter for a minute. He might actually switch to the opposite time slot so that both of us can try calling the rare DX.
Look at your screen.
So there's another one. So you can actually see here that while Steve's transmitting, the screen's a bit distorted, a bit overloaded. Well, that's all my receiver. So it's don't go throwing rocks at people when you see that. It's not their end. It's your receiver basically folding up. If I was to stick some more attenuation in my receive chain, I wouldn't see that. It would clean up and look quite nice. But the point is, everything on FT8 is about transmit on one half of the time slot, receive in the other half. So it's a 30-second cycle. You transmit in the first 15 seconds, you receive in the second 15 seconds. Ideally, what we try to do locally is if we have everybody transmit from Adelaide on, say, the even slot, and everybody in Adelaide receive on the odd slot. And that way, we won't crush each other's receivers, and we can all listen for the weak stations that are in the odd slot. Or vice versa, we could turn it around. So at the moment, I'm on transmit odd. So transmit odd, you set even or odd down here. So if I hit TX even, what does TX even mean? It means I'm going to transmit when this is either 0 or 30 seconds. So if I go and pick somewhere on the band that's quiet enough that I can get away with transmitting without clobbering somebody. So I've set TX even, my transmitter is now on. And you can see I'm transmitting in the 0 to 15 second slot. And my transmitter drops, and I'm now listening in what's called the odd slot, so the 15 to 30 second slot, or the 45 to 60 second slot. The idea is you want all the local stations to be transmitting on the same slot so that everybody can hear. Somebody else first call. Sorry, it's going to ignore me. if Steve was to, for instance, say, but I can now hear somebody in the odd slot, despite the fact that I'm transmitting, but I'm making it hard for him, and that somebody is pretty rare and he really, really wants to work them, all he has to do is send me a message and say, Grant, could you drop your transmitter for a sec? Or could you change cycles? I really, really want to work this station. And because we're all friends, yeah, absolutely, we'll do that. And vice versa. Now, we even have this problem between here and Victoria, between here and Tasmania. In the mornings, I know VK7AC puts in a thundering signal into Adelaide, and I'm sure I do the same back to him. When we're both on and we're trying to work Europe, I'll try to transmit on the same slot as VK7AC so that we're not crushing each other's receivers. So remember, it's all about dynamic range of the receiver. There's only so many dBs the poor receiver can discriminate between the really, really weak signals and the really, really loud ones. So the idea is, well, if you've got a local who's really, really, really loud, just you transmit at the same time as the local so that you're all receiving together, and therefore you've got a better chance of all hearing the weak signal. And that's one of the points between going odds and evens and trying to just control when you're odd and when you're even. Hopefully that's made a little bit of sense. It's not the easiest concept to get in the world. The key thing is with the odds and evens, if you're running something like JT Alert and you've got the messaging capabilities running, yeah, a lot of people don't run it at the moment. What's about? I can't find one. I was looking for one of the internationals. Oh, he was. So K9IG had it up. So you can see he's online. So if I wanted to work him or whatever and say, look, what's a clear frequency at your end is one of the common questions I've asked when I've used this tool. Because one of the big problems you've got is you're seeing the signals that you can see here in Australia. The problem is this looks very different to somebody in, say, the United States or in Europe. And sometimes I use the chat channel in the back end to basically ask questions like, well, where on your waterfall do you have an empty gap where there's nobody transmitting? And if they can tell me that, well, that gives me a better chance of actually getting through. And I'll pick the empty gap they tell me, and they'll tell me in terms of the hertz of this top bar. So if they tell me that I've got an empty gap at, say, 2510 hertz, I can go and click my receiver up here, or I can go and type it in here. So there's my transmit frequencies here. So I could go 2510, and that'll jump my transmitter to 2510. Let's say if they told me I'm on 700, I type in 700, you'll see the red bars move to 700. So now I'm going to transmit on 700 hertz inside that audio passband. Getting that feedback from the chat channel on JT Alert, absolutely invaluable to do that. So it does two things. It does that chat channel capability for those who run it, plus it also takes care of loading my log with the successful contact. And we can see here, I've just worked YD0 SJA, and that's gone straight into my log. I didn't have to do anything on the logging side of things to achieve that. So it's a handy little helper program. So that brings me to the question of when to log. That really comes down to what is the sequence of a contact. What's the easiest way to show this? Tell you what, Steve, can you come up on 7056? We'll go somewhere quiet for a few minutes. Except there's now somebody there. All right. Okay, we've got a CW station in there. All right, well, we can use 7056. We'll just go up to 2 kilohertz. So kilohertz away from him, we shouldn't bother him up there. So Steve, if you can maybe come up there, please, and I'll get you to give me a call. There we go. So the key thing here is to watch what you see coming up on the receive frequency window, because this is going to be a case of showing you the context of a contact. So he's calling CQ. So I'm going to let him call CQ once more. So this is the basic sequence of a contact that you can have. You can follow along in a second what's going on over here as well. So what happens is he's going to start calling CQ. I'm going to double click on his call sign. And this has now prepared the contact. So it does run automatically once you start it within limits. And you can control how much of the automation that this actually does. And away we go. So first of all, you saw he called CQ. So I answer him here. I've sent him his call sign, my call sign, and my locator. So that's the very first step of the contact. If he's calling CQ, I'll call in with those details. Ideally, he will now come back to me with a signal report. We're very, very close, so plus 34 is not unrealistic. I'll go back to him with the signal report. He's plus 30 to me. And I've done R and plus 30. So what that tells him is, I have received your report. Here is my report to you. So that's what the protocol's trying to tell you here. The next thing he should do is he should send me an RR73. So RR73 is an abbreviation of what we used to send. We used to send RRR, and then you would send a 73. Nowadays, they've abbreviated it to RR73, and then I would, as a courtesy, reply 73 back. But you'll see on his RR73, my log windows pop straight up. So I consider the QSO is finished once I receive the RR73 or some other acknowledgement. If I miss the RR73, I will send R30 again. Yes, all right, boys. And it will repeat several times. Now, there's a couple of tricks to this as well. Yep.
Where does the R plus 30 come from? Where do you put that in to the program?
The beauty is you don't have to. The program is generating and maintaining that signal report down here.
All right.
So because I'm in auto sequence mode, and this is important, I'm in auto sequence mode, so it's taking care of doing that. So I could actually call somebody else here. Oops. Turn that down a little bit. Come on, Theo. Oh, you've probably got to change over to me now. So I'm calling.
Sorry, I didn't mean that.
Answer us. Here we go. So I'm now calling Theo. So what's going to happen here? If you watch here, it's already populated a signal report. I've given him a plus 23, but that's because that's what I decoded him here. So I've decoded him at plus 23. He's answered me now, and his program will automatically populate the value of dB he's seeing me in there. So he's seen me now at plus 10. And because I'm in auto sequence mode, I will now go back with his report. So I heard him that over at 22. So it's put the 22 in down here. I'm going back with his report. He'll come back to me with a 73. Now, the problem with RR73, as I said, is if he misses the 73, when I send the 73, I turn my transmitter off and I won't reply again. This is the surest way to break a DX contact. If you're having trouble decoding and you've been missing frames and you're only getting every fourth or fifth frame, it's really advisable. So you see, I've just answered that. I've turned my transmitter off, enable has dropped. It's not red anymore. So as soon as I finish sending that 73, that's it. I won't transmit again. Even if he comes back with, if he misses it and says R22 again, or sorry, he goes plus 10 again, or he sends me, he'll send me my report again. I won't answer him. And so now you've got the catch. Well, I really want to confirm that contact with him. What do I do? There's a couple of ways you can treat that. If you're having a contact that is very ropey, it's not going very well, it's not just regularly happening through, one of the tricks I do is I can double click on this TX4 button, and you'll see instead of saying RR73, it's now saying RRR instead. So Theo, if you could call me again, please. Or call CQ again, or Steve, one of the two. I want to show you a contact with RRR. RRR is something I do a lot on 80 and 160 when the reliability of the contact's pretty low. by using the RRR and doing this, I'm going to have plenty of choice here. Let's see, who we're going to reply to. It's a lotto. So I'm going to reply to Steve with my report. In fact, that's probably not the right way to do it because I'm trying to send an RRR and I've just replied with the R23. He's going to come straight back with a 73. So let's actually reply to Theo, who's calling CQ, because CQ is where you'll see it. The whole point is the RRR will keep you sending your, I have heard your signal report, I have viewed your signal report until they send you a 73. If I'm sending an RRR, I will log it, and I can log it manually at any time with the log QSO button. Now, I do that because I want to say, if I've heard an RRR and he sent me an R plus 23, from my perspective, that's the end of the contact. From his perspective, he's actually acknowledged my report and is sending me mine. He doesn't know that I didn't receive it, perhaps. But as far as actually, have I exchanged a two-way contact? The answer is yes, I have. Do we both have a signal report in our logs? Yes, we do. Is it a valid contact? Well, in the old days before RR73, we would have said yes, because RRR used to be the terminating exchange. Everybody interprets this differently, though. So this is my view, but that's what I've done. If I get at least as far as an RRR, or I've sent an RRR, I'll at least log it. Now, whether I get it confirmed or not later on, well, see what happens. But hopefully, he's logged it too. And so that's the difference. I set RRR mode in weak signal conditions. If I'm going for speed, I set RR73 mode. What it basically means is the difference between a contact taking 60 seconds and a contact taking 90 seconds. When you're in RR73 mode and you're working a wall of Japanese stations on 10 meters, you can get along at about 50 to 60 contacts an hour in FT8 using RR73, because generally every contact you're ready to load the next one straight after. If you're on 80 meters and you're trying to work that really weak wear one, and they're prepared to work with you, so they keep retrying until you've actually got a proper confirmation, switch to RRR mode. It's a lot easier. If you don't do that and you're trying to salvage a contact, worst case I find is you've got to turn call first off, turn auto sequence off, pick the one you want to send, and just force it to send it. So if I've done all of that, so I've got auto off, I've picked the thing I want to send, I've told it to transmit. In that cycle, I'm transmitting it anyway and hoping that he hears it. And I can control manually which one I send for as long as I like. I don't have to run an automatic mode. So it's a little tip that I use for DXing is you don't have to run auto sequence mode. The other really hard thing to do, and I'm just going to hop back to 7074 for a second to probably try and cover this one little thing off about hidden transmitters. Then I'll have a look at Fox mode, and then that's it. Come on, 7074. There we go. One of the final things I find trouble with DXing is that RR73, RRR logging. Hopefully that's kind of a bit clearer to people. The other big problem with, and the sequence, you've hopefully seen the command sequence now. The biggest problem I have with HFDXing on FT8 these days is what I call the hidden transmitter problem. So I don't know what's going on the other side of the world in that band. I look at that and think, do I have a clear spot that I could call here? Probably the final thing I should just quickly explain. You see me zipping around up here with my cursor. I can right and left click to do different things. So if I left click, I'm just shifting the green bars. The green bar is where I'm trying to focus my receiver, although I can receive across the whole 3 kilohertz every time. But where I put my green bar is the first subband of your whole audio spectrum that the decoder is going to look at. It's also the receive point that's going to come up here in my receive frequency window. So if I want to particularly focus on one individual, I put my receive bars there, and it'll be the call sign that gets relayed into here. So you can see I'm moving my green bar around. That call sign got picked out, but I decoded everybody. If I want to shift the red bar is where I'm transmitting. So first of all, if I'm picking somewhere to transmit, I'm looking for ideally somewhere that's had dark blue for 2 cycles. Why 2? Because the first cycle is probably the one I'm going to be hearing somebody on later, particularly if I'm trying to call CQ. And the second cycle is where I'm actually about to transmit. Now, if I'm not conscious of where I'm putting my red bar, let's say I say, okay, so there's nobody in that slot there, so I can put my red bars here. Now, if I hit transmit and I'm on odd cycle, I actually would have transmitted over the top of him, despite the fact that he looks clear here. So right now, I'm not going to transmit because it's clear. I might say, hey, there's a clear spot. I'm going to put my red bar there. I'm going to hit enable transmit. Now, what's going to happen? I'm now coming up to 15 seconds. I go into transmit. Fantastic. Hang on. Let's just drop the transmitter for a sec. Oh, look. Somebody's transmitting at the same time on the same frequency as me. When you're trying to place yourself in the passband, you need to look for a slot that's blank on the cycle you want to transmit on, not on the cycle you want to receive on ultimately. You care about trying to get your signal to the other end, and because you're decoding anywhere in the 3 kilohertz, the fact that it's occupied on the 3 kilohertz that you're transmitting on, that you're receiving on, probably doesn't matter. It's not great because it might mean there's somebody in that blank, what you think is a blank slot you want to transmit in. There might be somebody on the other side of the world transmitting in it. So it's not foolproof, but at least it's a start. It's more foolproof if you can find 2 slots in sequence with nobody in them. And that's a little hard on 40 meters these days. In fact, it's very hard on 40 meters. It's pretty well clear for 2 or 3 cycles there. So I've probably got a shot of hitting CQ there. So if I run where I've got 2 or 3 cycles, I'm hoping there's nobody in the world on the other half time cycle transmitting in that slot as well. So I can set that up and I can now call CQ and see what I get. But every time you're trying to place yourself in the passband, it's important to think about what am I doing and where am I in that passband, but not just on the time slot I'm listening in, but the time slot I'm transmitting in. The other key thing to look out for is if you start making a QSO and all of a sudden he stops responding to you or it's not progressing, it's stuck at one step, it's a very good idea to, if anybody's ever watched Red October, do a crazy Ivan. Drop your transmitter and have a look, because it's quite possible somebody's moved in on top of you, probably because they didn't understand that little catch around, do I have anybody underneath me? And so it's always important to be thinking, what's going on the channel while I'm transmitting? Because if I'm transmitting and there's somebody else under me, nobody will be able to decode me at all. That's probably the biggest tip for trying to DX in amongst all the FT8, is try to keep thinking about what's happening 15,000 Ks away, what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Europe. Can they actually hear me? So in this particular case, by the way, I've set auto sequence to off still, and I'm just calling CQ. I've got all these people saying, why won't he answer me? I'll turn auto sequence back on. So at least now it'll automatically progress through that sequence. For those who are wondering, why is it auto sequence at all? Joe and the guys put it in here because at 15-second cycles, you end up with about 1 second to decide who to click on and which thing to send. Most people can't get it right in 1 second. So the automation is there to help you out because, to be frank, the mode moves fast enough that it's too hard to make a decision of I want him and I want that and I want that particular message. It's easy to just let the computer to run the sequence for you. The time slot stuff I've talked about. I think the last thing I really want to talk about is sort of the granddaddy of the DX modes. And I'll just ping David. Hopefully he's still there. He's been very patient. Oh, okay. David's just explained to me what the difference of fake it mode was. Okay, so David's now TXing. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go and show you now what happens in Fox and Hound mode. So I'm hoping he's actually TXing on 7056. All of the A-Rig people go to 7056, go into Fox mode. We'll see if we can't show you some of the sorts of traffic and things that you will get there. So what is so special about Fox mode? So, as I said, Fox mode is the ultimate DX chaser. I can sit here and be watching the Fox transmitting. And here's David. I'm pretty sure that's going to be him that I'm listening to. There he is. Now, if I transmit down here and try to call him below 1,000 hertz, I can tell you I'm not going to get a contact. Actually, I'll transmit below 1,000 hertz. Now, the reason is the Fox mode is very specific. Fox mode will only answer stations that are above 1,000 hertz. So if I transmit, as I'm doing now, David won't answer me. If I transmit above 1,000 hertz, he is now able to add me to his queue. And so if he transmits again, but I'm now above 1,000 hertz, he'll see me in the queue. Now, the first over, he'll see me pop up in his queue. He won't respond to me on the first over. He'll respond to me on the second one. So if we just let this go for a minute, he should be able to now load a couple of stations into his queue. And let's see how he goes. Some are not in hound mode, so you must be in hound mode for a Fox station to reply to you. So again, everybody, practice going into hound mode. So he's just heard me at 10. I'm now replying to him with my -10. Now, if we can get a couple of other stations call at the same time, we'll see if we can't trigger the multi-port mode, show you what happens with that, because that's when it starts to get really cool. So this so far just looks like a standard QSO. There's a trick here that you'll start to see. Okay, so you can see David's now come up as 2 signals. And you can in fact see that he's responded to VK5LA and VK5IR. Now this is the interesting line here. So you see he's gone VK5GR RR73 semicolon VK5IR VK3BDX, and he's given an ID. So what's going on here is he's actually acknowledged me and called the next station in the 1 over. And in fact, he's doing it to multiple stations at once. So now he's got 3 streams up, and there's quite a few callers here now. So in fact, he's dropped to 3 streams and I can't decode him. This is one of the catches with FT8, is that the more streams they run, the weaker they get, because it's trying to manage the intermodulation between 3 tones at once. So if you're listening, Dave, it might get you just to come up with just 2 streams. And I'll see if I can actually decode what 2 looks like. But you can see here, he's given the particular format for the double call. You would also have noticed, by the way, that my transmitter is now down here at 500. One of the things that Fox mode does is after I actually call, so VK5SA, Chris, you're not in hound mode and you're below 1,000 hertz. So there's no way that 5SA is ever going to get a contact like that. Actually, no, you're halfway through a contact, so you're okay. Yeah, this is where it gets confusing. If you jam somebody in a contact, what'll actually happen is they'll retry, they'll jump up the band and get a bit of congestion in there. Yeah, so we're starting to see some of the activity there. So you can see 2 streams coming back.
GRFR?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in hound mode and I'm replying at R-19 and he's replied to me at -15, but my auto sequence is not picking that up. Is there anything I have to do extra in hound mode to pick that up? Over.
Has he given you a reply? No, he's not. So I'm just going back and looking at what came back.
I've got a -15 from him.
Yep, so you've sent him a 19. He's either flushed his queue.
Yep, I've got my 73 there now.
Cool. Yeah, so that's the trick, is if you don't get it the first time, try again.
But you need to watch that, Grant. I actually changed my transmit frequency to 1700.
Yep.
And the program dropped it down to 380.
What will happen is when you get called, so this is the final step of Fox mode. When you're calling, you call above 1,000. What the software does is when they answer you, you will jump your frequency to the frequency they answered you on. And the idea is that nobody else should be on that frequency when you go to answer, because they've called you specifically down onto a clean piece of spectrum. That's the theory. It's how it's supposed to work.
Good explanation. Thank you.
What
GRFR?
doesn't... Yep.
And I noticed that I didn't send a 73 to his RR73. Is that
you don't need
to Hound?
That's specific to Hound. It doesn't care. Once it sent you a 73, as far as it's concerned, you're in the log.
Roger, FR out.
So there's nothing more to it than that. Yes, it will QSY you down to call on a clean piece of spectrum. Now, the problem is when people don't have cat mode turned on, or people aren't using Hound mode properly, and they try and just generally call on the Fox's frequency, and unfortunately we regularly saw this, if they're calling on the Fox's frequency, they jam the people QSYing down. And so nobody gets anything. Because the Fox isn't calling them, because they're just calling the Hound, it's calling the Fox all the time, but the Fox isn't trying to work them because they're not in the Fox's queue because they weren't above 1,000 hertz in the first place. But they're jamming the Fox's uplink channel. And so the Fox now can't hear anything. The fix for that is the Fox can actually juggle this transmit channel around a bit to try and walk away from the interferer. But yeah, that can be one of the problems with Hound mode and with Fox and Hound mode. And I've seen Fox and Hound mode literally disintegrate into chaos because too many hounds are not actually using Hound mode. You will probably get a chance, if you want to play with Fox and Hound mode this coming weekend. I can't remember the exact time, but I'm sure those on the VK/DX Chases channel on Facebook will be able to look it up. Because I know that we've got a sked coming with 4U1UN. They're going to come up on 40-meter FT8 and 20-meter FT8 on 2 skeds over the weekend. For the members involved on AREG, I'll look up the sked times and I'll post them to the AREG mailing list. If you haven't got 4U1UN and digital, this will be an opportunity. But he will be in Fox mode. The one final mode I think is probably worth mentioning is there's another variant of Fox mode running around, and unfortunately you usually see it on the main channels, not on the separate Fox channels. Yeah, the problem you can have is there's a program around called MHSV from memory. And it's basically a multi-headed JT65, but it's multi-headed FT8, but it's a WSJT knockoff. It's written by a guy in Bulgaria. The problem with MHSV is that it does similar exchanges to Fox mode, but it's doing them on the main channels. You don't reply to it in Hound mode. If you see somebody running 2 channels at the same time and they're on the main channel, they're likely to be running MHSV. Stay in standard mode. It also won't QSY you. So there's the trick as to how do you tell, is somebody running MHSV or not? If they're running WSJT in Fox mode, you will see people QSYing down to talk to the Fox. The Fox will always be below 1,000 hertz. If they're running MHSV, it can be anywhere. And here's the details Dave's just given me here. For all the VKs that need UN headquarters, 4U1UN, FT8 for ZLVK, Saturday the 16th of May, 0100 Zulu on 20 metres, 0430 Zulu on 40 metres, that one might not work, but 0100 on 20 metres long path, that should work. So look out for that one. 430 might just work. Be interesting to give it a try. So you'll see Fox mode being used for that. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a look and a feel for how this works. Are there any questions? We've gone way longer than I thought we would. But...
Just as a note there, Grant, when I got the 73 from VK3 BDX, because my software didn't transmit a 73, it didn't activate my logging program. My logging program's Ham Radio Deluxe. It might be different for yours, but just something to note there.
I would ask, do you have prompt me to log QSO ticked in this box?
I'm actually using JT-DX, and I do have the equivalent. So all of the QSOs that I've had tonight while I've been listening have prompted that log and logged in my HRD.
Except for the Fox mode one.
Except for the Fox mode one. I think that is because it didn't trigger my 73 sending.
Yeah.
I'll look into that.
It's interesting because, again, JT-X is another one of these knockoffs. And we know that they've bastardized some of the sequencing in both that and in MHSV. I guess it's a case of buyer beware. I mean, the guys who wrote the protocol are the guys who wrote WSJT.
Yeah, I'll look back into it, but JT-DX has significantly more decodes than WSJT out of the box.
I will give you a tip for that. First of all, make sure that you set it to deep and make sure you've turned a priori on. But the other thing I'll say is go and have a look at 2.2.
Yep.
Because Joe has substantially hotted up the decoders.
Roger. Now, I know Bob FO has the ability to run them side by side with his Flex, and he's got the same out of it. It's
Yeah, well, I can tell you, if you don't set deep and enable AP,
yep.
WSJT is about 3 dB def.
Okay.
You have to have that set to do a fair comparison. JT-DX runs it set that way out of the box. WSJT does not. But I can vouch for 2.2, and I can vouch for 2.1 with those two modes set, and I've run both of them side by side, and I actually find that they're about the same.
Okay. I'll have a review.
Yeah, Grant.
Yep.
Grant, I've run it deep, run it things. It just gets so much more out. I like 40 metre grey line of a morning. WSJT, might pull out 35, 38, where JT-DX, I'm pulling 55 to 60 decodes a cycle. Very, very common.
Yeah, there's something in the settings there, Bob, because I can make...
No. There's not, because it's running off exactly the same radio, same antenna, just a different...
No. Something in the software settings with the way the decoders are set.
No. Yeah.
Well, I'd encourage you to go and try 2.2.
Got a question off YouTube, Grant.
Yep.
From Dave Ingram. How can you tell if it's a Fox mode other than the place on the band?
Okay, so there's two hints if it's a Fox mode. One is if you start to see it do 2 or 3 channels, it's likely to be Fox. If they're 2 or 3 channels and it's below 1,000 hertz, it's almost certainly Fox. If it's 2 or 3 channels and you're seeing the triangular brackets RR73 semicolon and the start of somebody else calling at the same time, that's another signature of Fox mode. You will find them on different parts of the band. There's some standard Fox mode channels that a bunch of us sat down and had a global argument about back before the KH1/KH7Z expedition, which is what Fox mode was built for. So I think myself, Joe, the ARRL frequency planners, a couple of guys in the UK, we went at it for about 3 weeks before we all agreed on a set of frequencies. And that's where you've got the original set of 3567, 7056, 10131, 14090, 18095, 21091, 24911, 911, and 28091. They were the original set. Now, I have seen Fox signals on 7070, I've seen them on 7080, I've seen them on 7090, I've seen them on 7040, I've seen them on 7068. use your VFO, use your SDR receiver to look at the band and just see where it is. And generally, if you're not sure where he is, and it looks like he's got that sequence of there's a couple of one or two traces in the even fields and everybody calling in the odd fields, position the even fields so that they're in about the first 500 hertz of your passband. Stick your dial there, put it into Fox mode, and give it a go. That's the best way. I've caught many a rare DX in funny places by watching the SDR and doing just that. And sometimes these guys are sitting there lonely calling because nobody's looking. So, oh, damn, maybe I shouldn't have told you all to do that because now it's going to be more competition. But we're here to teach you how to do it. So that's fine. But yeah, that's one of the tips I use. And I've nabbed a few rare ones that way. They've gone to Fox mode. They've put themselves on the cluster. Don't forget to watch the DX clusters. You know, it doesn't all revolve around WSJT. So, I mean, I've got my old trusty CC cluster here. Keep a watch on that. People will put in FT8 and FT4 spots in here, and I'll tell you the frequencies that they're on. I haven't really talked about FT4 tonight. It's got its own set of frequencies. It's very similar to FT8. It's just a wider bandwidth and not as quite as sensitive, and it's faster. It's double the speed. There's a whole bunch of other stuff sitting in WSJT as well, because you've got all the contesting modes as well. We can talk about those for hours, how to hook it into N1MM and all sorts of things.
Grant?
Yep.
What logging software do you use?
Okay, so my logging software is a combination of I use JT Alert to feed the spots into it, and I run DX Keeper. So this is a freeware. This is freeware software. Written by AA6AV, is it? Matthew, you know, hopefully. I think that's his call.
Yeah, that's him.
That's him.
AA6AV.
So he wrote the software. He still supports it, which is good. It's a free logger. It does everything I need. It's not fancy. A lot of other people I know use HRD very successfully. I've just never gone that way for whatever reason. I can run and have run M1MM. So if I'm WSJT contesting, which to me leaves me a bit cold, but some people get a kick out of it. You can hook WSJT straight to N1MM, which is sort of like the premier contest logger. But yeah, this is the one I use. It does everything I need. So what's it doing?
Got another question off YouTube as well.
Yep.
How do you get the SDR to share the CAT connection with WSJT? My K3 doesn't like to feed both.
No, it doesn't. I've had to do a bunch of trickery to get this to go. The biggest piece of trickery is I finally capitulated and bought this piece of software. This is written by VE2SCA, and it's basically saved my bacon. One of the cool things with this is it can actually take control of the port from the Elecraft, and it actually will split it into 4 separately controlled channels of CAT. It's got a mode in here to split the CAT and literally make 4 ghost images of the radio. So present 4 virtual radios, but it's all then aggregates it all and does the contention management and presents one view of the radio back to the radio. And this software then presents it northbound to my logger, to WSJT, to N1MM, to my CW decoders, to my RIDI decoders, and I can run the whole lot at once with this thing. It depends on what CAT software you've got. I am a little, I guess, lucky in that years ago I was, for whatever reason, went down the path of the microhams. They also helped me a lot with that problem. They're an expensive way to make this problem go away, but the beauty at least is the microham will split the CAT for me. And in fact, I'm using the microham as part of my solution to feed this program so that this actually can then turn 4 more ports in. And it's basically doing internal logical loopbacks through the microham controller to create for me about 6 CAT copies of the K3. Not the easiest, the cheapest way of doing things, but it's solved my integration problem. I mean, one of the biggest problems I've always found is ham radio software integration just sucks. And this has been really hard to do. This was the solution I finally hit upon about 4 months ago after 2 years of trying, that I've actually found has been relatively bulletproof for me. But it's not everybody's cup of tea, and it does take a bit to get it going. The nice thing is, at least you can download this program, set it up, and you can run it for 30 days and see if you like it and see if you can make it work before it'll expire. And it's fully functional in those 30 days. So if at least you want to try it, download it and give it a go. You've got nothing to lose. Anyway, that's the way I solved that trick. Is there anything else people would like to ask? So we've gone now way longer than I expected, but I guess there's a fair bit to this.
Yeah, Grant. I've found lately, and I've been doing this too, I don't know how bona fide it is, but when someone calls CQ, I go straight back with a TX2, which doesn't give my grid coordinates. It just gives them their signal report, and you can get through a whole exchange a whole lot faster.
In fact, you're kidding yourself because you're not. There's still 4 steps to it. I've looked at this. I've actually played with this. I've tried answering people with just a signal report. And if you look at it, all you've actually done in the sequence, I'll see if I can explain it. I haven't got any sequences to show here. That'd be right. Because I'm on the wrong channel. Put it back on that. All you've actually done is, instead of starting with calling them at that, they respond with that one, you answer with that, they respond with that. What you end up doing is you call them with this one, they'll respond to you with that, you'll reply to them with that. You can skip that, but they can't transmit until the next cycle anyway. What can happen is somebody else can call them in there, but it gives the appearance of it's faster, but in fact, it still takes 60 seconds to have a contact. So a lot of people do it. And before RR73 became common, yes, it did save you a cycle. But since RR73 has become the norm, it doesn't actually save you anything. So is it worth doing? Look, some people will only reply to you. If they're CQing and they see you reply with a grid square, for some reason they won't reply to you. They think it's faster doing it the other way. From a station calling CQ and people responding to me, I can tell you, I can't take advantage of the free slot that it creates because I have to wait my turn so that I come back in the same slot that I started on. So in fact, it doesn't help me out in getting to the next contact faster. If we flip-flopped even odd, and could say that an exchange is only 3 transmissions, sure. It doesn't let me do a QSO in 2 transmissions. It always requires you to get that RR back to acknowledge. And that's the difference. So if you have we could draw it out and show you the difference. But yeah, I used to think that, and when I sat down and actually analyzed it, the reality is it doesn't actually save you anything. And you're throwing away a piece of information that some people might find useful. I guess the final thing, if I can just quickly find it, here it is. I'm going to put this up as a little ad. I talked about hidden transmitters before, and one of the biggest problems that everybody has is how do you deal with hidden transmitters and trying to get through your signal to the other end. So there's a group of us now formed here in Oceania. We call the Oceania FT8 DX net. We basically set up ad hoc nets away from the main channels. And we've done this so that we get away from all of the QRM and all the hidden transmitters, and we coordinated a bit on Facebook as to which frequency we're going to use. And what we're finding is when we get away from the main watering holes, I'm able to complete QSOs with the 10-watt foundation calls in Belgium and the UK on 40 meters. We don't have a hope of hearing them in amongst the European zoo if we stayed on 7074. But there's a whole bunch of F calls and foundation and standard licensees in Europe that are falling them over themselves to join this. And we'd love to see some more people from Oceania get involved with it as well, to try and basically help these little pistols get a contact with VK and ZL. So it's a bit of an ad. It's on Facebook. It's open to join. Just search for Oceania FT8 DXnet. Myself and Leo, 2WTF, are the admins. We'll basically welcome you with open arms. And the idea is you come along, you set up a sked on a frequency, and that attracts people to come and look for you on that other frequency away from the main channels. And we're having a lot of success with that. So it's a way of doing a bit of DXing in amongst what's become very congested channels. All right, look, I'm going to stop there, I think. Unless there's any last-minute questions, I'll simply say thank you very much, everybody, for putting up with us for well over an hour and a half.
Thanks very much, Grant. Oh, sorry. Thanks very much, Grant. Really good. Excellent.
All right, thank you very much, guys. At this stage for the AREG guys, hang around on the line because there's a couple of other things we've got to talk about. Hayden, thank you very much for the live stream, and hopefully everybody out on YouTube lands found this a little interesting at least. Thank you for the guys who also participated in the demos on the air. I saw a few calls there, so that was great. And who knows, maybe we can do another AREG lecture out this way in the future as well. So we'll see what response we get, I guess. So thank you very much, Hayden, for your help.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. And just got a few comments coming in on YouTube saying thanks, enjoyed it, really good presentation. So, yeah, those that are watching on the Ham Radio DX live stream, if you haven't already, give it a like and a subscribe as well to my channel. And yeah, look forward to the next one. So I'll end the live stream now, and thanks, guys.
Thanks, Hayden. And when Hayden tells us he's gone.